Welcome, network audiences, and welcome, Emma O'Halloran. Thank you for taking the time today to speak with me. We're really excited about featuring your piece, Some of Its Parts, on our concert coming up on November 14th at 7:30 p.m. And featuring Matt Levy, which we all can't wait for. I'm so pleased to be able to meet you today. And I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself to our audiences. Tell us a little bit about your background in music.
Sure. My name is Emma O'Halloran. I'm a composer, and you can probably tell from my accent that I'm originally from Ireland. But I moved over to the States about 8 years ago to pursue a doctorate at Princeton University. So I've been doing a lot of composition. A lot of my stuff involves electronics. You'll kind of hear that in the piece that Matt plays. And yeah, I think I love writing music that has very dense textures and that is emotional, and oftentimes I try to capture complicated human emotions, and I use that as my own, I guess, form of therapy. Or yeah, so I that's the sort of stuff I write.
Well, I'm really intrigued about what you said in terms of the sort of combining the emotional side with complexity. So I'd like to explore that more with you throughout this interview. But I recently learned that although you are Irish and living in Ireland, you do have a Philadelphia connection. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah, I lived in Philadelphia for 2 years. I was working on some sound design for the Wilma Theatre, uh, maybe in 2016, I think, or 2015, and I totally fell in love with the city while I was working there. So I ended up moving there for 2 years, and it's just a beautiful place. I've really fond memories of Philadelphia.
Excellent. I think audiences will be very pleased to learn that. So I understand that you also mentioned um, you're a vocalist, and from what I also understand is you also have an interest in dance. I wonder if you could speak about those influences.
Well, I guess I haven't done a lot of work with the dance, but I love I love dancing. I think I found my way into music very early on by doing ballet lessons, and actually while I was in Philadelphia, I started learning how to do aerial circus classes. So I did a lot of trapeze classes and silks and stuff, and that's its own form of dance. And I think it just felt very physical, and it was a nice way to think about how the body reacts to music. And yeah, so I guess that's my connection with dance.
That's great, and I think that's quite interesting too in terms of the rhythmical elements of your pieces, especially as they shift from sort of ambient textures to more active ones. And I find that a really fascinating component of your music. You would also mention too that technology is an important component of your music. Could you tell us more about the role that technology plays for you in both composition, creative, and expression?
Sure. I think I have a electronic music is probably at the root of who I am as a composer, and I I I didn't have a strong background in classical music growing up, and but I always loved music, and loved dancing to it, and I wanted to pursue that as a career. And when I started studying music at college in Ireland for my undergraduate degree, I took a sort of computer 101 computer music class, and it was a way for me to figure out how to very quickly make sound, because I didn't have to figure out how to notate it down on a page, because that was still sort of a foreign idea to me. But yeah, I was able to like stretch and distort and make sound very quickly, and that was really, really exciting. So that was sort of my pathway into composition, and I think it's informed a lot of the way that I write now, I love thinking of sound as something that can shift and transform sort of seamlessly. So you can take the listener on a journey from a place that is like relatively ambient to very quickly it's transformed into something rhythmic, and that sort of thing is really exciting for me.
Yeah, and you've composed quite a lot of works for solo instruments and technology. I mean, Points of Infinity, and the one that I was recently listening to was How Sweet the Thought of You as Infinite, for percussion and tape. And then on the concert on the 14th of November, we're featuring some of its parts. I wonder, could you take us through a little bit the creative process about how you conceived of that piece and then how you came to write it?
Sure. I think for me with electronics, I always ask myself the question, like, what is the purpose of these electronics, and what are they doing that an acoustic instrument can't do? Because I don't want them to take away the importance from an acoustic instrument. I love chamber music, and I love hearing musicians perform live. So oftentimes I'll try and find a way that it will either be an augmentation of what the instrument can already do, or something like that. So for example, with the solo marimba piece, How Sweet the Thought of You is Infinite, it is morphing the sound and detuning what the instrument does. So that's a very fixed pitch, and it echoes, but it distorts it as it goes along. With the piece that I wrote for Matt, I was just really excited to work with Matt again. Matt is just such an incredible performer and improviser, and he has decades of experience with discovering all of these different sounds and colors for the saxophone. So I wanted to create something that was entirely made up of saxophone sounds. So like almost the 99% of the electronics that he plays with he's playing with himself. So these are all these sounds that he's developed over the years, and that was really exciting for me. So there are moments where you're not entirely sure whether Matt is playing or whether it's the electronic soundtrack, and that sort of thing feels quite magical to me, where they can blend together and they can be one meta instrument almost.
Yeah, and I heard that too in How Sweet the Thought too, that it was this wonderful confusion about the sound and where it was coming from, and I found that incredibly attractive part of that piece. I'm also interested in how you use the voice with instruments, because I just today in the Shepherd Express they noted the performance of Constellations, which took place in Milwaukee, and for the Presence music series. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe even about that particular piece, Constellations?
Sure. I think over the past few years, I've really fallen in love with writing vocal music. Actually, I think it's probably the direction I'll go down. But Constellations, I wrote the text myself. It's a piece that was written for the Hildegard competition, which is a competition that is geared towards female, trans, and non-binary composers. And at the time, I was reflecting a lot on my identity and my, where I fit in the grand scheme of things in terms of classical music. Because when I was growing up, I didn't think it was even possible to be a composer, because I'd never encountered a female composer until maybe my early 20s. And after I did, I thought, oh, well, this is something that I would really love to do. And sometimes it's hard to imagine doing something if you don't see someone who looks like you doing it. So Constellations is about that, and I felt like it needed words to express kind of some of those things that I was feeling. But yeah, I love singing. I sing a lot. I mean, I don't have a big voice, but I enjoy singing, and it's really important part of my practice, I guess, to just play and feel myself playing the music as well, rather than just sitting in front of a computer or a piece of paper and just writing sort of disconnected from the sound.
That's excellent. And maybe to my last bit of question for you is also about vocal music, is about your piece Merry Motorhead. Because I was drawn to that line, the opening line, "I live mostly for the past now," which I think is sort of particularly resonant in this period when we're feeling like a sense of insecurity about where we are. And it was a chilling line to deliver. So I'm given your statement about constellations and fitting in and this maybe anxiety of the past. So we have the character saying, I live mostly for the past now. And even some of us may be feeling that too. Tell us about your sense of the future. Tell us about what music you're writing now, what you're thinking about now for the future.
Sure. I'm actually writing a lot of vocal music at the moment, and I think when the pandemic started, I took a break from writing for a while. It felt too difficult to write, and then I started stripping things away, and I wrote a few pieces that are very, very still, and it felt like a time to pay attention to the world around me and just reflect on things. And now I've started back into working on stuff, and I'm writing an opera that is, I guess, not a continuation of Merry Motorhead, but my uncle wrote the libretto for Merry Motorhead, and he's written the libretto for this new opera that I'm writing called Trade. And it's very different from Merry Motorhead, but it's still about that idea of, I think, people can construct their own prisons, and Merry Motorhead is about a woman who's in prison for a violent crime, and this new piece is a very intense sort of dialogue between two people who are in a room together, and they've sort of constructed their own prisons themselves. So it's really exciting for me to be able to explore like the human experience really deeply, and opera gives me that opportunity to do that.
Yes, it does indeed. And hopefully there'll be a time in the not so distant future when we can break out of our individual prisons and be together again. But I thank you so much for spending the time with me this afternoon. And again, we're so pleased to have some of its parts featured on our concert on November 14th at 7:30 p.m. Thank you, Emma, and stay safe.
Thanks very much.